Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into a new episode of Capitol View, a weekly webcast brought to you by the Daily Journal and djournal.com, here to talk about the state legislature and everything going on down there in the Capitol. I'm your host, Brad Locke, and with me, of course, is Bobby Harrison, our Capitol Bureau Chief, coming to us live from Jackson. Bobby, how you doing?
Hey, Brad, right here in the Capitol Press Room, live and in person.
Have a good weekend?
I did have a good weekend. What about you?
I got some stuff done around the house. I got a honeydew list done, so I kind of feel accomplished for once, Bobby.
Good for you.
Plenty to do down there in Jackson as the new week begins here in this 2017 legislative session. So we got a lot to talk about, a lot to kind of pack into this episode. We'll be here for the next 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you all for joining us. And if you missed this or missed some of it or all of it, you can just catch the replay later on in the day. It'll be up at djournal.com here. So let's start, Bobby, with the school funding rewrite. That's obviously a big issue, perhaps the biggest issue this legislative session. Now, the Thursday, there was a deadline for bills. The dummy bill, which is all it was for the rewrite, did not survive, Bobby. But it's really not dead, is it?
Well, technically it is dead, but it can be brought back to life. But more than likely, it's going to be brought back to life in a special session, Brad. There may be some other ways to do it, but it's hard to imagine how they could pull off those parliamentary maneuvers to get that done. This is, of course, the Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves and Speaker Philip Gunn announced in October they were hiring this New Jersey company, Ed Bill, to make recommendations on rewriting the Mississippi Adequate Education Program, which has been the school funding formula since it was passed in 97. It's fully enacted in 2003. And it's been controversial from the very beginning. There was a lot of people saying that the MAP didn't need to be rewritten. It just needed to be fully funded, which it has seldom been fully funded, only twice since it was enacted. And Ed Bill did not meet its deadline to get a proposal to the legislature. I mean, so far the Ed Bill and the leadership is trying to do this, missed every deadline that's been set. So it crashed and burned Thursday. The bills died, and so now they're looking for how to go from here. But the problem is, before they do anything, Brad, they got to. We still don't know what the proposal is that the leadership is going to come up with to rewrite the MAP. And a lot of the members are saying, until we know the proposal is, we're not going to vote for it. So that's where the ball is right now. Before they talk about a special session or anything else, they got to decide what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and proceed from there.
Yeah, Representative Jay Hughes from Oxford said it was a, quote, victory for backroom deals, Bobby. I don't know if that's just political speak, but certainly there seems to be a lack of transparency. And how much of that is due maybe to just the rushed nature of all this?
Well, it's a complicated process. And, when they did MAP in the 90s, I heard about it in, I guess like in 94 or 95, and they passed it in 97. So a lot of work went into it, and a lot of back and forth with a lot of groups. And they tried to do this. Ed Bill's tried, and no knock on them. They're probably a good organization, but they were hired for $100,000 and asked to do a lot in a short time span. And so far they just, all the deadlines. I'm not saying Ed Bill hadn't met the deadlines, but the combination of Ed Bill and the leadership of the House and Senate, they have not met their deadlines. And a lot of people are saying, if you are going to rewrite MAP, this, at this point, you just need to take a step back and make this a sort of year-long process. So, but like I said, we'll see what happens from here. Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves and Speaker Gunn said they're still working on developing that proposal. So we'll just have to see.
So for people who don't know, what's involved with either having a special session after this legislative session is over, or even probably less likely some kind of session within a session, if you will?
But only the governor can call a special session, and he sets the agenda. And he has gone on record as supporting this rewrite. He has wanted to find a way to get out of having to deal with issue a fully funded MAP each year. So he has gone on record as supporting this rewrite. But he can call it a special session anytime he deems fit. But I just don't think any special session is going to be called until by the governor until there's an agreement, because it doesn't do anybody any good to come down in a special session and just kind of when there's no agreement on each side, just kind of stare at each other. And as you said, that he could call a special session as early as today or tomorrow, but I mean that's not going to happen. But he can call a special session within a regular session. It's happened a couple of times in the past, and so that's a possibility. But I don't think until there is an agreement on how to go forward.
All right. Well, that's an issue we'll certainly be keeping an eye on going forward. Let's talk a little bit about some other bills that did stay alive last week, Bob. In fact, there were 3 bills dealing with the governor and perhaps enhancing his power, and they all passed by very narrow margins. We're talking about 1 or 2 votes, I think, in each case. One of them, of course, we talked about the civil service protection, removing that for most state employees. That one passed the House by 59 to 57 vote, Bobby. And I think we've kind of been over this. Basically, the proponents of it say, well, this will make it easier for agency heads, when it comes time to deal with budget cuts. Opponents, of course, say it'll give them authority to fire people just for political reasons. It's pretty much the gist of it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the gist of it. And that bill passed the House and goes on to the Senate. The other 2 bills you were referencing, they're still stuck in their respective chambers. Right. And there's one bill, there's over 60 agencies that's governed by boards, that are, the boards are made up primarily of professionals in that area, like cosmetologists, governed
cosmetologists.
Yeah, right. Barbers govern the barbers, accountants govern the accountants, and they generally assess fees on their members to run their operations. And there's a bill in the House that would give the governor the authority to sort of have final say on the regulations that each of these boards puts forward to govern their members. And that bill passed on a Thursday, but then on a Friday, it was held on a motion to reconsider, and they were there to dispose of that motion to reconsider and send it on to the Senate, and that motion was defeated by a wide margin. So they got to try that again today. If they can't send it to the Senate today, that bill will be dead, and that'll be a defeat for Governor Phil Bryant. There's another bill in the Senate that's in the sort of the same stage. It passed the Senate, but was held on a motion to reconsider, and that bill would give the governor the authority over the Department of Mental Health. Currently, the Department of Mental Health is governed by a board that the governor appoints, but if this bill passes, that board would lose its power, and the governor would have the authority to hire an executive director and make the final decisions regarding mental health issues in the state. All 3 of those are big bills that would expand the governor's authority, and at least one of them appears to be in a great deal of jeopardy. Maybe 2 of them could be in jeopardy, but we'll just have to see what happens today.
Senate Appropriations Chair Buck Clark said regarding the mental health bill that he said it would make sense to give it to the governor because of a bunch of federal lawsuits they're dealing with. Kind of wondering how that would. The reasoning behind what would make sense in their eyes.
Well, he's just arguing that the current regime at the Department of Mental Health has got the state involved in these lawsuits by the federal government. Other people would maintain that these lawsuits came about because that the legislature hasn't properly funded the Department of Mental Health. But anyway, another side issue on this is, Child Protective Services, oversees the foster care system in the state. They're also involved in a federal lawsuit, and of course that agency is directly under the governor, so it kind of cuts both ways.
All right, let's talk revenue now, Bobby. And this has been a bad trend for the last several months. Revenue collections have been down and remain down. And of course, as you noted, your story today in the Journal was about that, was about the budget writers trying to figure out how to write a budget with these revenue collections staying down. The outlook doesn't look good for the future, Bobby. And of course, got these projections and the revenues coming in below projections. which is a big problem because projections is what they use to kind of figure out a budget, isn't it?
That's right, and it was $18 million below projections. I think it was, Brad, for the month
Right.
of January.
Yeah.
And more troubling trend is last year the state collected less revenue than the previous year for only the fourth time in the state's history.
Yeah.
At least since 1970, and we're on pace to do that again this year. So it's just a troubling trend, and some people contend it's all the tax cuts that's been given that's causing this. Other people say it's just the state of the economy. But it's the governor's had to make several rounds of cuts. The legislature has had to cut budgets, and it appears they're going to make more cuts this session. So the trend just doesn't look good.
Yeah, for this fiscal year, the revenue is $116 million, or 4% below projections, and that's again that makes it really tough to as this trend continues. And Bobby, as far as what causes it, I know we've discussed this. I don't know if it just depends on how you work the math. Maybe a little bit difficult to really pin it down, though. I mean, is there any sliver of hope there?
Well, there's some other sources of revenue which I touch on in my story that could be available. They're beginning to collect internet sales tax. Amazon's going to start collecting the 7% tax on the retail items they sell to Mississippians and remitting that to the state. Some people estimate that'll be an additional $15 to $30 million per year for the state just from Amazon alone, which is a huge retailer. There's legislation alive that would try to force the other internet retailers to do the same. That would help the state. There's the Attorney General continues to win lawsuits that brings money into the state. Of course, the legislature's trying to stop them from doing that while they're spending that money. So that's kind of a weird dynamic. But the big corporate income tax is sales tax, and the income tax, the three major categories are all sluggish. So until they improve, it's just going to be a constant battle for the legislature and the governor to fund the agencies in education.
And speaking of Attorney General Jim Hood, there's some legislation going forward that would transfer some additional special funds to the general fund. They attempted this last year, but Jim Hood stopped the transfer basically because they didn't have the correct wording on the legislation. Isn't that what it was?
Yeah, it was just some real nuanced legal stuff. Hood essentially, the Hood's office said the bills didn't do what the legislature said they did. The words have to match up. The words in the bill have to match up with the rhetoric, and he said they didn't. So they're trying to work that out this year. But as it turned out, that's only going to be an additional $8 to $10 million for the state. So I mean that'll help, but it's still they're still dealing with budget woes, revenue woes.
Okay, let's close out the program with a little segment that we did last year during the legislative session. We revived it last week. Three things, Bobby, you want to hit on here. Most impactful legislator, most impactful legislation, and the craziest thing to happen down there past week in the Capitol. Let's start with the most impactful legislator.
Well, I'm going to mention a Republican from Forest County, from Hattiesburg, Toby Barker. Brady was born in '81, so what does that make him? About, I think he's 35.
Yeah, that's already
right. I think he's in his third term, and he's always been a real bright member of the House, and he kind of, for better or worse, kind of led the effort last week to turn the tide on that bill we were talking about earlier to give the governor all the authority over all those occupational licensing boards, the accountants, the barbers, the cosmetologists, contractors, the list just goes on and on. He spoke on that bill and said one person shouldn't have that power, and it went from passing one day to being defeated the next day by a wide margin. So I guess Toby Barker should get some credit or blame from that, depending on how you look at it. By the way, he's running for he's running for mayor of Hattiesburg right now. So if he won that election, he'd be leaving the legislature.
Okay, interesting. Most impactful piece of legislation from this past week.
Well, those bills dealing with the personnel board, the mental health department, and those Occupational Licenses Board. They're all big deals that would Mississippi always has been viewed as a state where the legislature has most of the control, and we have a weak governor. That's changed some over the years. Haley Barbour, who had played a big role in showing how the governor, even under our constitutional system, could have more authority. And if these bills pass, it would go a long ways to kind of taking some of that power away from the legislature and putting it in the hands of the governor. So we'll see how that works through the process.
And finally, the craziest thing you witnessed this past week down there in the state capitol.
Well, Brad, we hadn't talked about the lottery, the whole program here, so maybe we can end up by talking about the lottery. There was a couple of proposals alive to try to get around the system to get votes before the full chamber in the House to only enact in a lottery. Representative Steve Holland was from Plantersville was at sort of the heart of that. He had tried to amend bills and to force a vote on enacting a lottery, and the speaker had to rule on whether those efforts were proper for the bill. And one of them he ruled was not proper. The second one he ruled was proper. So there was a vote, and it was a voice vote. As all amendments are, the first crack around on an amendment is a voice vote. And once that voice vote is completed, the members have just a few seconds, if they don't agree with the speaker's ruling, to stand to demand a roll call and a recorded vote. And at least 10%, which is 13 members in the House, have to stand to force that roll call. And the speaker, who makes no secret of the fact he's opposed to the lottery, ruled that the yays had it, that there was more people voting to enact the lottery, and I think that was a correct ruling by the speaker. But the people, the lottery supporters, expecting the speaker to rule the other way, immediately stood. And so when they stood, more than 13 stood. So the speaker went to the board for a roll call vote, and on the roll call, the lottery failed. So if they had just stayed in the seats, the lottery bill, the lottery amendment by Holland would have been alive. But on the roll call vote, it was defeated, which was kind of ironic. I don't know if people understand that, but it was pretty funny, sort of legislative humor, I guess.
Oh, it's pretty funny, Bobby. Well, good stuff as always, Bobby. Thank you for enlightening us, and thank to everybody who watched. If you missed any of this, want to watch the replay, you can catch it here at djournal.com. Again, Capitol View comes to you every Monday around 2 p.m. here at djournal.com with Bobby Harrison, who you can follow on Twitter at BobbyHarrison9. I'm on there as well at Brad Locke. And that's it for this episode. We'll be back next Monday. Bobby, appreciate your time.
All right, Brad, take care.
You too, sir. Until next week.
All right.
Y'all have a good one.